In the heart of a marble palace, veiled in velvet and secrets, there sat a queen whose crown meant nothing. She wore gold on her head, but chains on her soul. She walked in silk, but never in safety, and every night she was made to witness the thing that broke her again. Not a battlefield, not betrayal, but her husband, the king, sleeping with her maids, while forcing her to watch a marriage of thrones and thorns. Queen Alina was not weak. She had been chosen from noble blood, intelligent, poised, and politically essential. Her marriage to King Edric was not for love, but for legacy. Together, they represented unity between two rival kingdoms. In public, they were perfect. She stood by him during parades. He kissed her hand before the council. But behind closed doors, Edric treated her like a rival, not a wife, not a partner, a problem to be conquered. And so, he devised a punishment far crueler than exile. The first night of humiliation, it began quietly. One night, Alina was summoned to the king's private chamber. She obeyed, dressed in midnight blue silk, unsure of what to expect. But instead of intimacy or conversation, she found two of her own handmaidens standing at the foot of the bed, trembling. "Why are they here?" she asked. Edric didn't answer. He simply ordered her to sit in a chair placed precisely at the foot of the bed. Then, without a word, he undressed the maids and lay down with them under her gaze. Alina tried to leave, but four guards stood behind her. The door was closed. The shame had just begun. Watching as a weapon, this wasn't a one-time cruelty. It became a ritual. Each night, she was summoned. Each night, new maids were brought in. Each night, she was forced to sit, not chained, but bound by something far worse. Royal obedience. She could not scream. She could not cry. Because to do so would dishonor the crown. Edric was careful. He never struck her. He never touched her in anger. But he made sure she saw everything, every sound, every moan, every glance that once belonged to her. Now, corrupted day queen, without a kingdom. Word spread quickly among the palace staff. Servants no longer looked Alina in the eye. The maids who were summoned to the king's chamber returned, shaken, some tearful, others blank. None dared to defy because they knew, if they resisted, they'd be punished. But the queen, she couldn't refuse either, because if she left, the rumors would turn into headlines, and the king had made one thing very clear. You will watch, because that is your place. You are my witness, not my wife. The psychology of public-private shame. What Edric craved wasn't physical pleasure. He could have that with anyone, anywhere. What he wanted was control through contrast. He wanted to make Alina feel powerless in her own palace, useless in her own marriage, and invisible in her own body. Each time he laid with a maid, in her presence, he wasn't seeking sex. He was delivering a message. You are replaceable. You are nothing but eyes. The silent revolt of the maids. But something unexpected began to happen. The maids, who were once passive, began to change. Some of them started glancing toward the queen as they undressed. Some sat on the bed, frozen, refusing to move until the king barked. A few, very few, even whispered apologies to Alina under their breath. And for the first time, Alina realized she was not the only one being humiliated. They all were. That chair that became a throne. One night, the king brought 3 maids into the chamber. He told Alina to sit, as always, but this time she didn't. She remained standing. Sit, he commanded. She met his eyes, calmly. This is not a throne, and I am no longer your audience. For a moment, silence. Then Edric laughed. But that night, he couldn't finish what he started. The maids wouldn't perform. They sat on the edge of the bed, unmoving, eyes lowered. The ritual had cracked. A new kind of power. The next day, whispers spread like wildfire. The queen stood, and with that small act, that refusal to sit, the image of silent submission shattered. It wasn't revolution, not yet. But it was the first brick removed from the empire of shame. Because Edric had made one fatal mistake. He taught his queen to watch. And now. She had learned exactly how to be seen. There's a kind of rebellion that doesn't roar. It doesn't come with swords or screams. It comes in stillness, in silence. In the way one woman refuses to blink. And Queen Alina had stopped blinking. She didn't cry, didn't tremble. Didn't look away. She watched her husband, the man who ruled kingdoms, as if he were a beast in a cage. And in that reversal, everything began to break. King, who could no longer perform. Edric had built his throne on shame, but shame is a fragile fuel. It only works when the victim accepts it. The night Alina refused to sit, something in him cracked. He brought in more maids. He barked louder orders. He stared at Alina, expecting pain, tears, submission, but she gave him none. Is this what satisfies you now? She asked softly. A stage no one respects, and an audience that pities you. The king couldn't answer. Asterisk, because for the first time, the room was filled with his shame, not hers. The maids who stopped undressing, asterisk, one by one. The women around her began to change. Asterisk, the maids no longer rushed into his arms. They delayed, stared at the queen before moving. Asterisk, and eventually, some refused. Altogether, we were trained to serve, one whispered, not to perform. They weren't revolutionaries, they were survivors. Asterisk, but even survivors learned to signal one another. Averted eyes, tied sashes, asterisk, bare feet instead of slippers. All silent signs that resistance had begun. Asterisk, and Alina, she watched, and remembered. The queen, who took notes, asterisk, Alina, began keeping a ledger. Asterisk, names of every maid, summoned dates of each ritual. Patterns in the king's behavior. She wasn't just surviving now, she was documenting. The chamber that once felt like a prison became a courtroom. Each night, another piece of evidence, asterisk, each sigh, a testimony, because she knew, men like him don't fear rebellion. Asterisk, they fear witnesses. The night of the broken order, it came suddenly. One night, Edric called for Alina, asterisk, but when she arrived, the room was empty. No maids, no guards, no candles, just the king, sitting on the edge of the bed, hands trembling. Asterisk, they didn't come, he said. Asterisk, your maids. They refused. Alina said nothing. She walked to her usual chair and dragged it to the fireplace. Asterisk, she sat facing the flame. Not him. Perhaps they've finally learned, she whispered. That shame burns. Everyone it touches. Public whispers. Private collapse. The royal court began to change. Edric stopped appearing at public events. Asterisk, he grew paranoid, angry, isolated. He blamed Alina, but could do nothing, because she never disobeyed. She never shouted, never slandered. She just watched, and now the entire palace was watching with her. The chamber became a temple. Asterisk. What was once a room of humiliation became a sacred space for the maids. They began to enter it in silence. Not summoned, but willingly. They lit candles for those who had suffered. Asterisk, tied red sashes around the bedpost. Asterisk, whispered names in the dark, not of kings, but of the broken. Asterisk, and Alina sat among them, not as queen, but as memory, because she was no longer just the one who witnessed. Asterisk, she was now the one who remembered. The fall of a man. With no audience. Powerful men don't fear justice. They fear irrelevance, and Edric had become irrelevant. He tried to summon new girls. They fled the palace. He tried to charm new allies. They laughed behind closed doors. The kingdom no longer saw him as ruler. Asterisk, they saw him as a man who couldn't control even the women in his own house. The final command. Asterisk, one night, Edric stood before Alina, tired, thinner, alone. I order you to forget everything you've seen, he said. She tilted her head. I obeyed every command, she said. Asterisk, but memory isn't yours to command. Asterisk, he raised his hand, not in violence, but desperation. She didn't flinch. He lowered it, walked away, and was never seen in her chamber again. Her throne was never the crown. Alina never seized the throne, never demanded power. Asterisk, she didn't need to, because every woman in that palace now answered to her, and every girl born after servant or queen was told the same story. There was once a woman forced to watch, until the day she made them all look